Hi, my name is Hugh Gonzalez. I'm an application specialist with Mamaki USA. Thanks for joining us for our monthly tips and tricks webinars. I'll be showing you how to create 2.5D textured files to print in our JFX200EX. Come on, let me show you how. So before I begin, I want to first apologize if there's any background noise or things like that. I'm not in a quiet room, so I can't really control all the noise all the time. First of all, I want to show examples of what 2.5D texture effects can do. This is a pretty basic example where it's just text that was embellished with raised printing. As if you're familiar with UV printing, you know that this kind of effect can be done by layering many prints. And that's essentially what 2.5D does. It automates the process of raising any print to create a nice effect. This one is 5 millimeters raised on the golf ball. So as you can see, we can vary the height of the print, and we do that by controlling the grayscale. This example for this demo, I will be showing you how to create this type of file in Photoshop. Now, I'm going to pause it here. This one, it looks like it has huge relief. Most of the shading does come from the image itself, from the photographer. Sorry, I don't know his name offhand, but I took his image and I cut it out. I cut out the parts where obviously I didn't want it raised, and I embellished the light, the grayscale of this image to create the raised relief for the rest of it. And that's what I'm going to show you how to do, is the basics of creating this. So 5 millimeters doesn't really sound like very much, but design with the added texture really adds a lot to visually and tactilely to, I'm sorry, I don't even know if that's a word. It adds a different dimension to what would otherwise be a flat 2D print. So even 5 millimeters of clear ink buildup is enough to, really give it a different look, different feel. This particular piece, people have walked up to it assuming that it was a carved piece of wood. So it's partially a good print, and it's partially the relief that we're going to create with 2.5D. So part of the texture that you're seeing is, part of it is in the image, and the other part is actually in the plywood itself. So some of the wood grain is actual real wood grain that comes through the clear ink. Of course, first you start with your basic image. We're going to take advantage of all this detail that you see in here, because any amount of texture, adds a better visual look. It gives it more of an authentic look. First, I'm going to save a copy of the color layer. It's important that we have a copy to fall back on. I'm not going to move the placement for this one, so which is also important, so that the texture overlays the color. Once you kind of settle on the design, then is when you move on to creating the texture file. I'm going to create a black background because the buildup happens with the level of white, basically. So 100% black means that there's not going to be any buildup at all. 0 black or 100% white means that there's going to be up to 5 millimeters of buildup. We want to knock out all the parts where we don't want any buildup at all, and I'm going to do that to this background. So here I'm gonna just kind of see where I'm at. So this is, I'm doing a mask transparency, so I'm not editing the file at all right now. It's a little easier to work with the color layer at times. But I'm going to skip forward to the final layer for this, because I would take more time, finesse all the curves, feather them so that I'm not left with super hard edges. Although in this case, we do want hard edges on some of these shapes because it'll create more interest. All right, so I'm gonna take a quick pause here and I'll be right back. Okay, so when we have all of our negative areas, one step that we can do, we can actually go ahead and put this over to grayscale since we already have a saved copy of the color layer. So I'm going to do image mode grayscale. And I'm going to say don't merge because I want it to be actual negative space, not just, you know, painted black. So I'm gonna leave that as a separate file. One of the next steps that we want to take is actually increase the brightness and contrast. I like to do it through levels. And what we want to do is create a really high contrast or a higher contrast between the high and the low spots. So that you don't end up with just, you know, kind of a flat buildup of clear ink. So a quick way to do it is actually just to bring in so that you're severely limiting where the ink is building up and at what levels. So while these gradients, these will show up, but you want sharper gradients. It creates higher relief. And you could play around with the image to see what works for you. Something like this, where it's almost black and white, actually works because one thing we have to remember is that the image itself has a lot of color shading. You don't actually need this to feel like there's smooth slopes within the wood. There will be some, like in this area here, that there's a soft gradient. So the combination of the color file plus this will be enough to give the effect that you're looking for. So this is the file that I actually ended up printing. I stayed heavy on the white so that there's buildup. If you notice areas like this, these are gray. So this is a noticeable slope compared to the buildup here. And I'll see if I can point that out to you in the other images. As you can see, I've already loaded these. The first thing I'm going to do is actually layer the files because once we start changing attributes, we'll have to match profiles for them. And back on the main page, if you notice, if I select the color one, it doesn't give me any texture options because this is a color layer. But this one, since this one's a grayscale, it actually has options for monocolor, so I could do exchanges to white ink, primer, things like that. But we're going to select Texture Maker because this does an automated texture buildup. So at 17 layers, it'll build up about 5 millimeters, or I'm sorry, half a millimeter. So we can do up to 17 layers, which is half a millimeter, but I'm only going to do 3 for now, just to show you what ripping's like. And before I rip it, I'm going to make sure that the profiles are okay. And as you can see, this one, the texture one, already has its profile set, so you don't need to do anything on this end of it. It already, you know, so if you set your default for the color layers, then you don't need to do anything on this end. It'll change everything as it needs to have a great print. So I'm going to go over to execution to rip it. So it's pretty standard. For the 3 layers, it took approximately, started ripping. So under a minute for 3 layers. So you figure if you have all 17, you're looking at maybe 5 minutes for like, this is a pretty regular computer. As long as you can run Photoshop on it, you're fine. And sorry for all those errors. That again, that's just because I'm not physically connected to a printer right now. So there it is. This is the image we did. Of course, I sped this up. You can't really see the clearing on this. You could see that there's a little bit. I'm going to pause it here. You can see on the top portion that there are, you can see that it was printed on. The clear ink will shift the color a little bit, but that is temporary. The clear ink will, after a couple days, it will go perfectly clear. So this is what the clear looks like on the plywood. As you can see, this is the same design, but you could barely see it because it's actually quite clear. But as it's printing, it does have a very slight yellow tint. All right, and I think I've just about covered it. Let me know if you have any questions. Here to answer your questions regarding 2.5D printing and JFX200EX. Thank you.